morning and welcome back to the lecture series on performative gender and religions in South Asia. We are discussing Sufi mysticism and poetics. So, we were talking about the gender nature of the lyrics where we find a feminized voice, the voice of the devotee as a female, a beloved, beseeching union with the lover, the divine lover or the murshid. So, the gender construction of uh, kafania or shroud and the ghunghatiya or veil in the musician's narrative is very interesting because both these words, kafania and ghunghatiya, that recurrently comes back in Sufi lyrics, they are both male nouns. However, they are referring to feminine objects, right? Kafania and ghungatiya are themselves male nouns, but they are associated with the female. They are female accessories or objects donned by the females. The Sufi vocalists use the gendered form of the noun jogan, which refers to the female mendicant, the female wanderer. Uh, and this term jogan has been derived from the male noun jogi, right? So, jogi or the ascetic, its female uh, noun is jogan, jogania. They add iya to jogan and make it jogania. These devices convey a kind of humility. The Islamic, expression for humility would be ids, or humility, and the humility further creates intimacy in the performance through the forms of address. So, it is not only Jogan, but as a way of intimately referring to the Jogan, one says in Sufi lyrics, Jogania, right? It emphasizes, accentuates humility or ids. The ghungat invokes bridal imagery or kasaf, which is the lifting of the veil in Sufi poetry. So, kasaf is the lifting of the veil in Sufi poetry, and it is a common erotic image available in so many of the Sufi poems. In the Sufi poetry sung in the oral traditions around the Siraiki belt of Multan, Bahawalpur, Mianwali, and the northern Sindh areas, the female voices are very prominent, they are dominant. The feminized narrator is dominantly available. A large number of Abida Parvin's lyrics are derived from resources such as the kafis or short verses that express mystical thoughts. So, what is a kafi? That is another lyrical composition we are going to discuss today. Kafi is a composition meant to be sung along with music. Its subject is commonly mystical and its central theme is repeated in the refrain in order to create the context or the sama. Now, Kafi uses folk motifs from its immediate environment to emphasize the mentor disciple or the murshid murid relationship. Furthermore, the earthly metaphors communicate or lead to the spiritual metaphors. Earthly metaphors or ishq majazi are a way to understanding the spiritual metaphors or ishq hakiki. So, Sheikh Farid or Fariduddin Ganshakar, who is also commonly known as Baba Farid, is said to be the creator of this Kafi form, in which the human soul is a feminized one. It is treated as a female beloved and contextualized in the imagery of marriage. In the following Kafi by Siraiki Sufi poet Khwaja Ghila Farid, the female narrator mourns her separation from her beloved who has gone to a distant land. So it goes as follows: Met tek mint kardi swal asanbhal. Translated to English, I beg thee, O beloved, cast thy good fortune on us. In another Kafi, the female lover is described in bridal imagery uh, through the following lyrics. Musag malinda guzar gaya din sara, singar karinda guzar gaya din sara, kajla payam surki layam, kitam yar vasara, kang urende umar vihanti, Ayana Yar Pyara. When translated to English, the entire day I have spent to polish my teeth, the entire day I have spent to adorn myself, kohl I put on my eyes, my lips I color, the beloved I recall, a lifetime have I spent to shoo away the crow, but thou, my beloved, never came. So it's a song about longing, a song about waiting for one's beloved to come, one's lover to come. Khwaja Farid also uses Hir's voice, Hir's persona for the ultimate spiritual union or Ishq-e Hakiki through the imagery of Ishq-e Majazi or earthly love, as can be understood through the following lines. So Hathan me ranja hoi, riha fark na koi. When translated to English, with Ranja have I become one, between us is there no separation. So with Ranja have I become one, between us is there no separation. These kafis are somewhat similar to the images of the suffering and pining female in the bhakti poetry, where the theme of separation is called viraha, and the feminized narrator expressing viraha, expressing the feelings of viraha, is called the virahini, the female beloved suffering the pangs of viraha is called as the virahini. The feelings of separation expressed through the female narrator are available in the indigenous poetic traditions of different vernacular languages. The woman usually professes her love for the divine, and a female, so feelings of separation expressed through the female narrator are available in the indigenous poetic traditions, available in different vernacular languages, where the woman professes her love for the divine. Female Sufiana Kalam singers such as Abida Parvin, Reshma, and Suraya Multanikar, they all sing with the Virahini voice, the refrain, and the emotions of the Virahini or the separated, yearning beloved. Virahini poetry is also sung in the Sindhi devotional contexts, such as the Mauluds, which celebrate Prophet Muhammad's birth. In these songs, in the Mauluds, the devotee is usually a young bride or bride to be who awaits her bridegroom, and the image of the bridegroom is equated with Prophet Muhammad. All kinds of bridal imageries, such as the wedding ceremonies of Mehndi, is expressed through the Sufi lyrics. Interestingly, these poems equate the bhakti concept of viraha with the Sufi concept of ishq, right? So, what is viraha in the bhakti repertoire, becomes ishq in the Sufi tradition, referring to the burning, consuming longing of one's soul to unite with the Supreme One, the God. So Amir Khusro adapted the voices of longing in his discourse, and a number of critics claim that the use of the female narrator, the feminized narrative voice in the Sufi poetry of northern India could partially be an influence from the Persian poetic genre called the Shama. So it's on the one hand an influence from the local immediate uh, environment, the bhakti tradition that is dominant in the Indic context. And on the other hand, some of the critics point out that the feminized voice, the longing of the beloved, could be an influence from the Persian poetic genre called the Shama. So, like the Hindavi Geet, Shama is said to be a popular poetic form that is suitable for adaptation to music, and it was used in rural Persia for women's songs. The Shama is a poem or a song in Persian not exceeding 17 couplets. So, Sufi lyrics available in South Asia belong to a variety of indigenous, hybrid, oral poetic traditions. So, another poetic convention which is linked with the female voice is that of Rekti. Rekti is a major poetic genre in the Deccani literature of South India. That is also something that deeply influences and inspires the Sufi lyrics of South Asia. Rekti is a subgenre of Urdu poetry written in the ghazal form, in which the narrator is a woman and where the narrative idiom is said to be that of women. So, in Rekti, what we are discussing or what we are, celebrating is Orto ki boli, the discourse of the females. Rikti is set in gendered opposition to Rikta, which is another name for standard Urdu ghazal poetry, and it seems to have become equated with any poetry having a female narrator, regardless of the poetic diction. The presence of the female narrator in the Deccan poetry has made it non canonical with respect to the mainstream Urdu literature. So, it in a way, one could say that Rekti exists as a counter discourse to the larger Rekta tradition. It's a breakaway, it's a kind of, it's not antithetical, but it is a kind of counter gaze. It's a comeback on the Rekta discourse, which is almost celebrating a homosocial milieu, right? From where the woman is very prominently absent, very obviously absent. So Rikti is celebrating that female cosmos which has remained kind of absent, invisibilized in the in Islamic literature at large. So, within the canonical North Indian literatures, Rekti discusses what one can say as the औरत की तरफ से जज्बात का इजहार करना, in other words, expression of passions or emotions from the woman's point of view. So, Carla Pitayevich uses John Thompson Platt's definition of Rekti, which is derived from Rekta, referring to Hindustani verse written in the language of women and expressing the sentiments peculiar to them. The critics argue that generally poetic conventions of canonical Perso-Arabic literatures have marginalized the creations where the narrator is the female. The female voice is predominant in the grassroots, in the indigenous Sufiana Kalam traditions, and sometimes in the Qawwali traditions, that are composed in indigenous context. So, the Bulle Shah Qawwals sing the poet's Punjabi poetry in Punjabi ang or style, where they create the female myths in their lyrics. The female myths are generally sung in the Sufiana kalam available in vernacular languages with minimum or minimal musical instruments, sometimes the only instrument being the iktara. The presence of the female narrator in Sufi discourse points to how the Sufi is an offshoot or a breakaway from the established clerical order, just like the Bhakti movement is a breakaway from the Brahminical tradition or the Brahminical order. The established orders have always taken upon themselves the interpretation of the faith, uh, creating some institutionalized power structures for the ruling classes. Economic hegemony could be sustained through religious, social, and cultural structures that were upheld by the clerics and patriarchs. So, economic hegemony could possibly be maintained only through such codified practices, codified and prescribed understandings of religion and social mores, cultural structures, cultural practices. So, through the mainstream institutionalized religions, shame and honor became associated with a control on women's sensibilities. So, a restraint on women's expression was something that any institutionalized form of religion emphasized. The improvised Sufi poetry that Abida Parvin, for example, uses in her performances subvert such orthodox notions. So, Abida Parvin refers to Shah Abdul Latif's poetry and Khwaja Ghila Farid's texts, and she uses frames from Sufi poetry in order to chastise or criticize the religious establishment and thereby speak for the marginalized groups. The radio in Pakistan has played a significant role in identifying and bringing to the fore musicians and thereby providing them with a livelihood. Female musicians such as Abida Parvin are immersed in the spirit or ruh of Sufi poetics and music, and they can create their own rakao or context within which their discourse, flourishes. It could be called a discourse. It could also be called uh, a context or a cow for the formation of a counter discourse. Abida Parvin's evolution has been within grassroots mystical traditions, which is later enhanced through her training in the semi classical and classical traditions of music uh, under her father's guidance, Ustad Ghulam Haider, and later by her tutors, Ustad Nazakat Ali Khan and Ustad Manzoor Hussain. So these are some of the trainers, her own father as well as two of her mentors that have trained her in the semi-classical and classical traditions. As she was trained within the male traditions, dominantly male traditions, her style is somewhat exceptional. Abida Parvin uses the dohra or the bait, in other words, short two-line verses within the main body of the narrative. And this is a style she has imbibed from her male mentors, which includes her late husband, Sheikh Ghulam Hussain. So she has been trained by a number of male performers and singers, and her own performance has adapted those particular, styles that are associated with male renditions. So, because Abida Parvin has been trained chiefly by a number of male performers, so her performance has adopted the male style of Sufi rendition. The fact that now Abida Parvin has introduced the call in the Sufiana Kalam tradition further fits in with the argument that she is perhaps the only female musician who applies essentially a unique male style, a style that she has inherited from a series of male trainers and mentors that she had. So, the Qawwali genre of Sufi music is essentially a male domain in the officially organized Urs celebrations in Pakistan that commemorate the Sufi saints' death anniversary at their shrines. Some key musicians are invited to sing. One could imagine that in Urs, most of the key Sufi singers are males, they are male performers. A female performer, such as Abida Parvin, is also invited to sing at Shah Abdul Latif's shrine, which is not a mean thing, which is not a small thing. It's revolutionary in itself. The fact that she is visible, she has attained visibility within a homosocial discourse such as the Qawwali, right? Although she does not belong to the roving minstrel tradition, she does sing lyrics related to the tradition at the shrines and in the concerts. So, before we end today's lecture, there is one thing we need to, understand clearly, that while on the one hand these compositions, these lyrics have been written in a feminized voice, the singers are themselves male vocalists, right? They are singing in feminized voices as the bride of the Murshid, as the bride of the God, but they are nonetheless male singers. The fact that Abida Parvin has been able to make a space of her own within this homosocial discourse of Qawwali, within this homosocial Qawwali tradition, says a lot about how successful she is, what kind of a superstar or stardom Abida Parvin enjoys, and the kind of androgynous appearance that she wears, the androgynous voice that she sings in is remarkable and unparalleled. With this, I'm going to stop our lecture here today, and let's talk more on this topic in our on swing lectures. Thank you.